How exactly are the Browns this good, and what do the Texans need to do to upset Cleveland? Is it an upset? We'll talk about it. Welcome to the channel. I'm Cody Stoots. Let's talk some Texans and Browns, and let's do it with a very good friend of mine, one of the most talented radio guys in the entire nation. He works in Cleveland, afternoon show on 92.3 The Fan. Nick Wilson joins me. My man, how you doing?
Doing really well, man. I'm doing better since there was a 5-point swing in this game when CJ Stroud was considered out. So that helped calm my nerves a little bit. But the Browns are winning. It's Christmas time. I have a beautiful family. Like, honestly, dude, if I asked for anything more at this point, I would just be a greedy bastard. So I won't. I'll just say I'm in a really good spot, buddy.
Yeah, you are in a good spot. And I think that's where I want to start is just, how do the Browns have this record? Like, how are they where they are now, right in the thick of things in the AFC playoff hunt? They've got a one-game lead on basically everybody else in the wild card. They can own a bunch of these tiebreakers. Like, how are the Browns this good when they've dealt with, it feels like, as much as just about anybody else this season?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I don't think there's one specific answer. I think the easy thing would be to say this is Kevin Stefanski's best year as a head coach. He's just done things we haven't seen him do previously. You know, one criticism of Kevin, and this is something I've said, quite frankly, is that there were some times, especially the last 2 years, and even in the 11-win year, his first year here, where they went to the playoffs and beat Pittsburgh, the COVID year and all that, there were times where it felt more important to Kevin to lose his way rather than win the way the game dictated. And, you know, if you look at it, they got the living tar beat out of them against Baltimore when Deshaun Watson first got hurt. And so, you know, they didn't really prep the backup quarterback. They didn't really play a style. Like, they came out, 7 of the first, 10 plays were passes for a fifth-round rookie at quarterback. So, you know, that next week against San Francisco, they just uglied it up. It was just, we're gonna run at you and physically dominate you. That's not really something Kevin had shown in his toolbox. And so they've done that multiple times. And, you know, so I give Kevin a lot of credit. And I do think, you know, they've had some mercenaries in this locker room the last couple of years. They had Jadeveon Clowney, who that first year was a revelation, and the next year was from the book of Revelations. He was a pain in the ass. And, you know, you had Odell Beckham Jr. and the way that went. And all of those things I do think tugged at the fabric of this locker room. And this year, even though you still have guys that you brought in on like a 1-year deal, it's the right group of guys. And if you had told me, I'm telling you right now, man, if you had told me 4 different quarterbacks in your first 12 weeks, you would have had 7 quarterback changes because of injuries. Deshaun would only play 6 games this year. Nick Chubb would play 5 quarters. Myles Garrett, for a quarter of the season, would be playing with one arm while getting triple teamed. Denzel Ward would miss, stack missing games 2 separate times. This last week, he was playing with one arm himself. I mean, I would have said this is a 4 or 5-win team, maybe less because of the quarterbacks you would have had to play, PJ Walker, DTR, and Joe Flacco. And instead, every time, and this is a huge thing for Browns fans, every time you think, well, that's it, and it's been a nice run, and it was a lot of fun winning X amount of games, but this is probably where it goes tits up. Every time, the opposite happens. They rally, and it's just, you know, like, I'll be honest with you, man. I don't think I've ever, in my adult life, right, and I've been an adult for most of the time the Browns have been back in the NFL, I don't think I've ever seen a team that embodies Cleveland with the Browns better than this. There's no pomp. There's no circumstance. There's just a bunch of dudes who go out and kick ass every single week. And it isn't always pretty. It isn't always consistent. But every time you count them out, they're like the Undertaker. They just spring up right back to kick in the nuts. And I got to tell you, it has been a pleasure to watch this team play this way.
I got to be honest with you. I thought going into this season, if this thing goes sideways, it gets a little weird. They've got some other coaches on the staff that have head coach experience. I thought this could have been, Stefanski's last year, and then maybe Deshaun gets a heavy say in who the next coach is. But now, I mean, he should be made probably coach of the year. They make the playoffs. I mean, when you talked about all the different things that they've dealt with, I mean, he should be coach of the year. And I mean, he's not going anywhere.
One of the big things we talked about earlier this week was if you could only throw your support behind one of these, would you throw your support behind Myles Garrett for Defensive Player of the Year or Coach of the Year for Kevin Stefanski? And the easy answer is Myles, because he's never won the award before. Kevin did win Coach of the Year his rookie year, that 2020 season where they beat Pitt. So it was a surprise to me that while it was still lopsided for Myles, still roughly about 30% of people voted for Kevin Stefanski.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been funny because there's still fans that up until like 2 weeks ago were calling and saying they should fire Kevin Stefanski. And yet, I'd probably say 70% of fans shout it down. And we, the media, I actually still have some questions about Kevin. And I think long term, I wonder if Kevin, the head coach, needs to help have Kevin, the offensive coordinator, because of some of it's not struggles. It just doesn't look the way it should when Kevin's coordinating an offense for Deshaun. But when it comes to who's going to be the head coach for the next 4 years, I've never been more resolute in thinking that Kevin Stefanski is the guy. And I would be shocked if he didn't get a huge contract extension this offseason. And you got to understand, man, there's been one coach in the last 15 years to make it to year 4, and it was Romeo Crennel. His last year was 2008. Every other coach has been 2.5 years max. And to me, what this says is the Browns have stabilized under Kevin Stefanski, and it's not too far of a thought that he could be the longest running head coach. Like, he could have a run here that goes a decade.
Wow.
And you got to understand, Marty Schottenheimer is beloved in this town. Marty didn't have a decade. Sam Rutigliano was another guy that he didn't have a 10-year run, right? Blanton Collier, Forrest Gregg. Like, the only guy to have a decade-long run in Cleveland Browns history. Think about what I'm saying with that. They've been around since 1946. The only guy that has ever had a decade-plus long run is Paul Brown himself, the man that founded the team in 1946. I think that tells you the importance of this season, solidifying Kevin Stefanski and getting that contract extension.
All right, that's big picture. Let's talk about this weekend. I'm mystified that Joe Flacco comes off the bench, and I understand there's been some issues. Certainly, he's had some turnover problems, a couple of fumbles, lost one of them, the interceptions, but they haven't killed him. They haven't been backbreaking. You look at where some of these things come, and Flacco's just out there. I know the first game against the Rams was a bit rough, but the past two, he's put it together. Like, what's he got left? What do you expect out of Flacco? Because it feels like, yes, this defense is really good, and you can't lose a shutout. It's an old sports cliche, but you're going to have to score at some point, and Flacco's going to have to move the ball at some point.
So it's funny. I think if you talk to the average Browns fan on the street, they will make out that Joe Flacco has been perfect since taking over three games ago. And the reality is he does have I think it's 6 turnovers, and five of them being interceptions. Now, some of them have been just timing. Some of them have been, this is a guy who's been with the team for 3 weeks. So some of them have been kind of okay, but you still can't turn the ball over 2 times a game and win in the playoffs. So that has to be really feted out here over the final 3 weeks of the season. But he offers something that none of the other quarterbacks kind of successfully did this year. And that is his ability to make big plays down the field. And he still has a howitzer for a right arm. It doesn't always go exactly where he thinks it's going to go. But, man, I'm telling you, this is an offense. And right now they're struggling to run the ball because of some offensive line stuff. They're on their 4th and 5th starting tackles this year. And those are going to be your starting tackles the rest of the way here because DeJuan Jones, Jack Conklin, and Jed Wills are all out for the season. You've got, you're healthy at wide receiver, but it's still this isn't Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Nick Chubb is out, and so what I mean to say is they have to start becoming more consistent on the drives in between scoring drives. and limit the 3 and outs, because I do think that puts the defense in difficult positions.
Yep.
But when it comes to Joe, the deep ball's there. Now the question is, if you're not going to have a running game, can we just tighten up? Can we get a little more crisp in the short passing game? And I think some of that is just timing and chemistry. I think some of that is comfortability. And, I think as long as the the interior core, so from Batonio to Teller, if your 2 guards in your center can just get healthy and be healthy, I think it gives him a chance. As important as tackles are, specific to a statuesque quarterback, he's got to be able to step up into the pocket when he gets that pressure off the edge. And when he's been able to do that, he's been remarkably clean. So he's got enough left. I don't know if enough left means, whether that's just he's going to get you to the playoffs, which feels like a foregone conclusion. You got like an 86% chance now, or whether it means he can win you a playoff game or more. That is about the pieces around him. But I think and I can't believe I haven't mentioned this yet. I think the most important thing about this is I think Joe Flacco fits what Kevin Stefanski's offense requires perfectly. This is, Kevin Stefanski schemes guys open, and it's your job to go read 1, read 2, read 3, deliver the ball. And, you don't need to be mobile, which clearly Joe is not at this point, although he moves a little bit better than I thought he would. But you just need to make those throws. And I think he's done that. I think of all the quarterbacks, and that's Baker Mayfield, that's Case Keenum himself, that's Jacoby Brissett, that is Deshaun Watson, and now any of the other guys they played this year. I think Joe Flacco fits what Kevin is comfortable with in his offense, what this offense is designed to be, more than any other quarterback he's had. And I think that's exactly why Joe Flacco in Cleveland has looked better than he did in New York or in Denver the last 4 or 5 years.
I tell you what, from a Flacco standpoint, I'm just scared to death that some of those quick, easy throws are there, and that defensive line that the Texans have is just neutralized in this one. Because, when the Texans lose, it's been, hey, Zach Wilson's making a quick decision, getting the ball out. You're not getting any pass rush on him. Hey, you can't rush the passer against Desmond Ridder. Hey, this guy or that guy can just really get the ball out quick, make some quick, easy throws. The linebackers can't cover. They can't cover. So, quick stuff, short stuff, that's where you can really start to, get to the Texans. And then every now and then Jalen Petre's just lost. And then there's all of a sudden a wide receiver behind him. And it's like, oh, okay, that's a giant play.
Yeah. Well, so I think what's interesting is I think the intermediate stuff is what they've just not been best at. But I also think they've been forcing it because they haven't had a run game.
Yeah. So
the way I've kind of thought about it is Kevin Stefanski's really good at scheming up that first drive. And if he has, if you look at the Jacksonville game, it was effortless. It was, I think, 8 plays. And in the end, I think it ended with either Jerome Ford or David Njoku, a huge touchdown. He was just left wide open. But then what you'll notice is after that, there will be a lull. It'll be, and, in that Jacksonville game, it was the next 6 drives were 3 and outs.
Oof.
And I think a lot of that is because the offensive line has not been healthy. They've just not run the ball well. I don't know how you feel about this, but once you get to, when it's no longer Nick Chubb, Christian McCaffrey, Saquon, we're talking about the elite running backs. Those guys can produce whether your offensive line is healthy or producing or not. But when you get to a running back by committee, which is Jerome Ford, Kareem Hunt, and Pierre Strong Jr., that's where all of a sudden the offensive line makes the running back. And so I think in this case, Jerome Ford is a big play waiting to happen. They just haven't been able to. They've got him open in the pass game, and that has helped. But this is one of those games where the Browns probably are going to score first, okay? And then if they can get the running game going against the Texans, you guys might not have a chance given what you guys are up against.
Yeah.
But if you can bottle up that run and put it on Joe in that intermediate passing game, it's not that he's not going to hit 50% of those throws. It's that you might be able to pick one off. And that's the kind of thing, from the Browns perspective, the second CJ was out, it became, this feels like a game that, a don't muck it up kind of game. Don't turn the ball over, play crisp, run the ball well, and deliver 8 passes down the field. If you connect on 63.5% of them, well, you're going to win this game. You're going to win it comfortably. But I think we're past from the Cleveland side of things. I think this is just who they are. I think they're a little bit sloppy. I think they're feisty as hell. I think they're physical as hell. But I don't think there's an easy win. And it's funny. This week, no CJ. Next week, no Aaron Rodgers. Zach Wilson might not be ready. The Jets are caca. They're out of the playoffs. And then the finale is the Bengals on the road. And if Jamar Chase ain't going in that game, Jake Browning is going to look like Jake Browning should look. So the path is there to go win 3 straight games here. The problem is you're so banged up. You're on your 4th-string quarterback. I think this idea, I think Texans fans at the very least should be able to expect and should go in expecting a close game. It might not come to fruition if they have the rare perfect game, but this is a moment where I think this game's going to be puckering time for both teams, well into maybe the 3rd or 4th quarter.
All right, quickly, I just want to talk about this defense. Myles Garrett's incredible. Last year, he was in a stretch of getting a sack basically every game. Didn't have a sack against Houston, but he still terrorizes them. The right tackle situation for the Texans is way worse than it was last year. Garrett versus a hindered Laramie Tunsil. I like Myles Garrett in that matchup. I like Myles Garrett in that matchup with a healthy Laramie Tunsil anyway. I don't know how they're blocking him. And so that just kind of I don't know what to expect from the offense because I don't know how you block him. And then when you do put the ball in the air, this has been a pretty nasty defense. So it's I don't know how the Texans are scoring.
So I think you got to, ironically, what you said about, mitigating the Texans defensive line. I'm going to just tell you, I've been paying attention to John Grenard for a minute now because he has been teasing what he's doing this year for a couple years. And obviously I was watching him last year because Obo Okoronkwo, who's not going to be in this game, but has been a stud for the Browns this year, was one of your best defenders last year.
Yep.
And so I got to say, I'm really happy for you guys. I think DeMeco Ryans is a real dude. I think CJ Stroud has magic to him.
Oh yeah.
And as great as Will Anderson can be, I love what Grenard's doing. That's to survive what he's done. I think he's a great player. Sorry, I'm now raving over your players. Now let me get back to Myles. What's interesting, Myles has kind of been stuck at the 13 sack mark since his shoulder got messed up. And it happened in the Denver game. And he had said he had heard a pop. And, they have taped him up. Apparently it's not season ending, but that was 4 games ago. And so he got a sack on 2-point conversion against Jacksonville on Trevor Lawrence. Now, of course, those don't count towards sack totals, which is the dumbest friggin' thing I've ever heard. But anyways, That's really his sack. But what he's done in lieu of getting the quarterback is pressure the quarterback. And he has been a monster against the run. And he had a 6-yard TFL in this last game that completely stymied the Bears' response drive when Cleveland scored the touchdown to tie the game. I mean, it took all the wind out of Chicago's sails. So he is still making an impact. And I think, unfortunately for the Texans, your best chance here is to get the ball out quickly. The problem is, without Tank Dell, without some of the other guys, I don't know you can make the kind of plays in that short game. So it kind of feeds directly in to what you're either going to have to let plays develop and then you're at risk at Myles Garrett, or you're going to have to try and pray to God that this team that does not misses tackles and your guys can make some plays. So specific to Myles, I think he is getting healthy. He had 11 pressures last week and had that gigantic TFL. And this is a guy, you got to understand, if you go back and watch the film of the last 2 weeks, not only is he dealing with the shoulder injury, he's dealing with the fact he's being held in a way that honestly constitutes cuddling. Opposing offensive linemen and the Browns, Myles himself called this out. If you look at it at least once a quarter, if not 2 times a quarter, opposing defensive tackles are basically taking their arm, putting it under his armpit and choking the man. He's getting close. He's getting home. And I feel like the dam could break this weekend. You mentioned Laramie Tunsil. If it ain't this weekend, it's going to be the Jets game. There's going to be a multi-sack performance coming from Myles Garrett because he is heating up and he is getting pissed and he's getting healthy, which is not what the Texans, the Jets, the Bengals, or the rest of the NFL heading into the playoffs really want to see because this is the best version, even with the last 4 weeks notwithstanding, Cody. This is the best version, the most dominant version of Myles I've ever seen.
Well, have fun on Sunday, George Fant, and whatever tight end has to help George Fant, and whatever tight end has to help Laramie Tunsil.
Watch Chicago. They were throwing 2 offensive linemen at him and chipping him.
Yeah. And
he still had 11 pressures. I mean, it's funny. I don't know that he's going to have the sacks for the Defensive Player of the Year award because, as you and I both know, if you're a linebacker, if you're TJ Watt, you get, it's tackles, it's sacks, it's forced fumbles, it's, all these, it's what's your coverage numbers. If you're a defensive end, it is, do you have 18 sacks? Do you have 20 sacks? But I'll tell you right now, and I said this yesterday, I led my show with this. If they've got 6 games of Deshaun this year, so that is, by the end of the season, it's going to be 11 games, almost, 2-1, the amount of games you didn't have Deshaun versus the games you did. 5 quarters of Nick Chubb. 8 games of Jedrick Wills, 11 games of DeJuan Jones, 0 games of Jack Conklin. You start to go through it. I'm telling you right now, any one of those guys could miss the full season, and this team is 9-5. If Myles Garrett is the only guy that if he had missed, we're talking 10 games to this point, the Browns are probably a 4-win team. And that should absolutely factor in. It's fun to watch him on Sunday. I think watching all 22 is one of the most boring. I think that's something that a lot of dudes do that is a little embarrassing when they talk about watching the all 22. That being said, watch Myles Garrett's all 22. It is pornographic, Cody. Like it should be set to a low grooving bass, and there should someone in a kimono should walk in halfway through saying, "Are you here to fix the cable?" Like that's the level. Honestly, it shouldn't be allowed on NFL.com. It wouldn't be allowed on pornographic, on Pornhub. Pornhub would be like, hey, we might have some stepsister and stepmother stuff going on here. We ain't putting this Myles Garrett all 22 out there. It is, honestly, it's some of the most fun I've ever had watching a guy on film because it is just, it defies logic, the pressure he's able to get in the face of double, triple teams in terms of a chipping running back, and then the tight end will leak to the back end, and on his way to the flat, he'll also chip. So he'll be chipped twice in the same play while being double teamed, and the bastard is still impacting where the quarterback's going because he's pushing guys into him. It is, I gotta be honest with you. Got a little time before work here. I'm gonna put some Sade on. I'm gonna go ahead and put a little of that film on, and I'm just gonna see where the afternoon goes.
See, that's why you're one of the best. All right, I don't want to take too much of your time, but I gotta ask you. This was billed as C.J. Stroud, Deshaun Watson, and you're a wrestling fan, so you know as much as I do. Card subject to change, and now we got Case Keenum and Joe Flacco. What's the Deshaun Watson vibe in Cleveland? Because even when he did play, it wasn't amazing. He's hurt again. He had the suspension last year. He's not really ever had like a vintage Deshaun Watson game. Like what's the vibe in Cleveland around Deshaun Watson?
So I think to really assess the Deshaun era to this point, it takes a lot of nuance, which is something that sports fans tend to not be good at. Not just sports fans, it's the American public, it's the world. I think if the goal this year was Deshaun has to be a top 5 quarterback, that's clearly not what happened. I think it's really concerning that he has now had 2 shoulder injuries to his throwing shoulder in 1 year, and specifically about 6 weeks. And some of that ties back to, as you guys remember, this dude just does not know how to give himself up on a play.
No.
And I was screaming about it for the first few weeks of the season. I had diehard fans who've watched this game for decades telling me I was wrong and then had to come back and eat crow. So this latest injury, I don't know he'll ever be Deshaun again. Just this injury is something we see in baseball pitchers, not in when you're talking about a broken bone in your shoulder. That being said, when it comes to the actual football on the field, his last 3 games were wildly encouraging. He had a phenomenal game against the Titans, especially in that second half in week 3. He came back after the trade deadline, November 5th, against the Cardinals, and it was the easiest victory of the year for the Cleveland Browns. And then against Baltimore, he was bad in the first half. And with a broken shoulder, Cody, he went 14 for 14 and led the Browns back from down 14 on the road in Baltimore, where they never win. And he got the dub 35-33. And what has been wild to me is, with all that being said, there's still a segment of fans who, now that Joe Flacco's balling out, well, Joe Flacco's better than Deshaun Watson. And it really is, it's just about where the expectations are, and they should be different. But I think my point is, what has surprised me is that Baltimore game. Listen, I have had a really tough time. I understand, pragmatically, I understand the trade. And every team in the NFL, I mean, there were 13 teams that called about Deshaun Watson in spite of the allegations. Mm-hmm. So let's not act like the Browns were big bad voodoo daddy here for just being the team that actually paid him what he wanted to come to Cleveland, because it's the only way he was coming here. So the idea that the Browns are the evil one and the rest of the NFL is pure is a load of crap. But I was that's the pragmatic side of it. If you can trade for a top 5, top 10 quarterback, you do it, damn the circumstances. Now, here's the flip side. I was torn. I was torn about bringing somebody in with those allegations, with those lawsuits, with everything. And that being said, and honestly, I don't think he's still kind of, I don't know, man, there's still some things about him that he's just kind of a young guy that you can clearly see has gone through stuff. And at points, he doesn't say the right thing because I think he's still trying to rebuild himself. And yet, in that Baltimore game, watching him play that way, and this is before the context of the broken shoulder, watching him play that way, it was the first time I thought to myself, oh, that's my quarterback. Mm. And I thought that was really powerful. Browns fans and Houston fans, this thing run deep, man. Whether you grew up an Oilers fan and you're now a Texans fan, however you want to say it, it means something when somebody finally takes the mantle of your quarterback. And so it was the biggest gut punch in the world when later that week, 2 days later, he's out for the season. The biggest surprise, the biggest shock. What has frustrated me is that Browns fans who hailed, okay, he's here, let's do this, we've got a franchise quarterback, have now turned on him. Mm. And I understand the complexities, the intellectual complexities of that. This is a case with a lot of ins and outs, in the words of the Big Lebowski. But the guy had delivered. The last time we saw him, he delivered. And it still feels like we play a game of whack-a-mole when Joe Flacco comes out and has a decent game. Oh, well, he should be the quarterback next year, in spite of the contract, in spite of everything. So that's a long-winded way of saying, I think there are people where I am, which is, let's just get the kid healthy. Let's give him a chance to really earn it back, but really appreciative of how tough he was this year. And there's still that probably 10, 15, 20% of people who it's just, until that dude plays like a $230 million quarterback worth 6 top 100 picks, and until he plays like Mahomes, it's always going to be, yeah, but with Deshaun.
Yep. I feel that. Nick, you're the best, man. I know I told you, hey, 10, 15 minutes. You gave me twice as much time. You're very generous. I'll count that as my Christmas present.
Well, here's the thing. I never shut up. So this really isn't on you. As soon as you said 10 to 15 minutes, it's like, I won't shut up for 30 minutes. So that's where we're going to get here. But seriously, to Houston fans, this CJ Stroud stuff is awesome, man. I watched him at Ohio State. Never in a million years did I think he would be this good this early. He's worth a 5-point swing in a potential playoff game in week 16 in the NFL. I think DeMeco Ryans, watching what happened to Lovie Smith and what happened to David Culley and what happened to this organization where you guys felt like the new Cleveland Browns, watching you guys be able to get D'Amico Ryans, the kid that played for you and was the heart of this team for a minute with Gary Kubiak, watching CJ Stroud, and honestly, guys like Grenard who survived, guys like Stingley and Pittry and all these guys. Like, I'm so happy for you guys because that's what the NFL is about, right? That is when you have been kicked in the nuts 100 times by the football gods, to then have the Texans rise from the ashes here and have the storylines and have that connection with D'Amico Ryans and that connection with CJ. I'm just so happy for you guys. So sincerely, congrats on where this thing I think is going with Houston. And to you, to everybody listening, I'm a big sap around Christmas. So happy holidays, Merry Christmas. Hope everybody's in a good spot. If you're not, at Nick Wilson says, if you're having a rough day, you need to talk, let me know. And, other than that, guys, just really happy holidays. And I appreciate you, Cody. And I'm happy to see where you're going with this thing as well.
Man, thank you so much. It's been great watching you over the time from where you've been, where you are now. And it's very cool, man. I appreciate the time. I appreciate you dropping all the knowledge on the Browns on the folks here.
Anytime. No, by the way, bad luck on Sunday. But outside of Sunday, good luck to the city of Houston and with this Texans team.
I would wish you bad luck, but I don't think it matters.
Yeah, this is probably also fair.
Nick Wilson, 92.3 The Fan. Go check him out at Nick Wilson Says on Twitter, X, whatever the social media thing is called now.
On X.
Nick's the absolute best. I've known him for a few years and incredible. And like he says, I mean, he could get going on any topic. He's fun. He's informative. That's the best breakdown of the Cleveland Browns that you're going to get from my guy, Nick Wilson. The best barbecue you're going to get around this time is from my friends at J Bar M. J Bar M is where you got to go to get your barbecue. 2201 Leland here in Houston, down in Edo. The fantastic deals for the weekend, like the $2 wells on Fridays and Saturdays. The Tex-Mex menu is incredible. Head out to J Bar M. The barbecue is amazing. I'm a big fan of their brisket, but they do everything well at J Bar M. That burger on this screen right here, that's one of the best burgers in all of Houston. They get the live entertainment on the weekends as well. Don't miss out on your chance to go visit with my friends at J Bar M. Have some fantastic, incredible barbecue, and the beer garden is perfect for just hanging out, watching a couple games. It's bowl season. It's almost playoff time for the NFL. You go watch a Texans game there. It is a fantastic atmosphere. They will take care of you when you roll in there. The big giant manager, Hoffy, tell him Cody Stoots sent you. Go follow them on Instagram because they're always putting up tantalizing photos of that incredible barbecue. And as you see it here, the wells are $2 on Fridays and Saturdays. The burger, you got to get this burger when you get the opportunity. The smoked brisket burger on Wednesdays. Specials each day, man, they do it all over at J Bar M. You got to check them out. They're great supporters of the channel. We greatly appreciate our friends at J Bar M. You can follow their Instagram in the description down below. You're a great supporter of the channel as well. If you've watched this late into the video, I greatly appreciate it. Appreciate all the support here on YouTube. So much fun stuff left in the season here for the Texans, and so much fun stuff here on the YouTube channel. Subscribe if you haven't already. Throw me a like as well. I appreciate you watching the video, and I can't wait till we talk Texans again soon.